The UFC is heading to Abu Dhabi for UFC 280. I mean, this is going to be a pretty easy card for you to promote, but I don't know if you heard this crazy stat from my colleague Chuck Mindenhall. If you take out Petr Yan, who's an elite fighter in his own right, former champion, and you take the rest of the 9 fighters on the main card and the preliminary main event, they're on a combined 81-fight unbeaten streak. It's just an unbelievable amount of talent. This could be the most talent-rich card in UFC history.
Yeah, I was just talking about that yesterday with the matchmakers, and it's true. And especially, one to really point out, somebody who sort of flies under the radar is Charles Oliveira. When you think about it, he's on an 11-fight win streak, right? It's the second longest in lightweight history behind Khabib. He's got the record for most finishes in UFC history. He's got the record for most submissions in UFC history. He's tied for overall UFC post-fight bonuses. He's got the most Performance of the Nights awards in UFC history, most submissions in both UFC lightweight and featherweight history. The guy's a record machine.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because Khabib amassed a 13-0 record in the UFC, like you said, at the longest streak in lightweight history. It took him 8 years to do it. Charles has done this in 3 years. And if he beats Islam, that's 12 in a row in 3 years. So when do we start talking about Charles Oliveira in the same kind of vein as Khabib? I mean, Khabib will always have the undefeated record, which is always going to be a big notch on his belt. But what Charles has been doing against the level of competition he's been doing it against is incredibly impressive.
You're absolutely right. And obviously a win over Islam would start, I think, a lot of discussion about Charles Oliveira.
You're often asked about the one that got away in terms of fights that got booked. We hear about Brock versus Fedor and things like that, but one that got away 6 times is Khabib versus Tony Ferguson. It never ended up happening. And the reason why people were so intrigued by this fight is because Khabib's wrestling was so high level, and off of his back, Tony Ferguson was going to give him problems, and that's what everybody wanted to see. This time around, we have a very similar situation here. Is Makhachev versus Oliveira kind of the next best thing? Because I'd argue that Oliveira is probably the most dangerous fighter off of his back ever that we've seen.
I agree with you 100%. I don't want to say anything negative about the other fight, but this fight is about as good as it gets with 2 absolute studs in their prime. Like I was just saying, you got Oliveira, who's on an 11-fight win streak. You got Islam, who's on a 10-fight win streak. The only thing that you could argue in this one is that Oliveira has fought much better competition in his career, but look at who Islam trains with every day. I mean, this guy trains with straight animals every day, including Khabib. So you got to put that in there too.
The co-main event is a great one. You've got Aljamain Sterling against TJ Dillashaw. Now, Dillashaw never lost the belt in the octagon during his last title run. He was caught doing performance-enhancing drugs, which he took full responsibility for. If he's able to beat Aljamain Sterling here, is this a redemption story? Do you think people will ever be able to look at him the same way, even if he's able to regain the championship? Because, again, he never really lost it in the cage, and the situation that arose was from a flyweight fight against Cejudo.
I do think so. We all make mistakes, and how you recover from those mistakes is how people will look at you. So Dillashaw took responsibility. He took it like a man, sat out, and now he's coming back. So let's see what he does.
I mean, ultimately, he doesn't have to answer to the public. I mean, the public are going to think what they're going to think about any range of topics. But I think at the end of the day, if he wins the championship, he can look at himself in the mirror, look at his son and say, every step of the way, I did the right thing, even though, of course, he was caught doing something wrong, during that title run.
I agree with you 100%. He handled the thing like a man. You either handle your business like a man or you don't. He did. He deserves credit for that. He deserves respect for that. And we'll see what happens.
I think it's fair to say that Sean O'Malley is the biggest star that's been produced by the Dana White Contender Series to date. He's 27 years old. He's taking a massive step up in competition against Petr Yan. Yan just an absolute machine at bantamweight. How risky is this? Like, if you were sitting in the matchmakers meeting and this fight comes up, is there an argument about whether it's too early to...
We did.
Yeah,
we did
so tell
argue
me about that.
Yeah, we did argue about it, and I ended up agreeing. It was actually Sean Shelby that was pushing for it, and I actually ended up agreeing with Sean. And, O'Malley is on the cusp of being a massive global superstar. And, there was some talk earlier about Conor. He said, I'd like to be as big as Conor and stuff like that. Well, if you want to compare it to Conor, this is like the Conor Jose Aldo fight. And when you have that type of star power and you have that thing that people are attracted to, then it's about winning key fights like this. So for O'Malley, he wins this fight on Saturday night, his entire life changes on Sunday.
And on the flip side of that, if he does lose, he's 27, still has time to, make up for it down the line. Is that kind of what the thinking was as well?
Yeah, 100%. Well, that's the thing. He's 27. He's in his prime right now. I mean, he's got a ton of fights. O'Malley's 15-1. The guy's got 16 fights. It's not like he doesn't have the experience. Got knockout power. He's got the range. He's got speed. Got all that stuff. So he's got the tools to win this fight.
It feels like he's actually become underrated and underappreciated because of how popular he is. Because people look at whatever the level of competition, but he has so many different weapons and is such a diverse fighter. And for a guy like Petr Yan, who likes to download information about his opponent as the fight goes on, he might be a difficult one to peg.
Yeah, that always happens when somebody comes out and has, a lot of stardom quick, I guess. People try to on him and whatever. That's part of the deal. But yeah, listen, Petr Yan is an absolute savage. I mean, the guy is a machine, and O'Malley's got his work cut out for him. But I do believe that O'Malley is it's the right time for this fight.
People still today say that Conor McGregor's overrated. Like, people don't remember that he took a fight with Chad Mendes on 6 days' notice, a completely different stylistic matchup, and knocked him. I don't know. It boggles my mind. I mean, I know that Conor McGregor hasn't had the best stretch lately, but I think people forget how good he was during that featherweight run.
But you know what the difference is? The difference is all the people on the outside didn't see the things that I saw. Everybody's like, oh yeah, because he loves Conor. Why do I love Conor? Why? Because he makes money. Everybody makes money. I like Conor because I was in the trenches with Conor when this stuff was going on, and that I'd walk into his house that he rented in Vegas, tell him the fight was switched. Believe me, there's a lot of guys who talk like, oh, I would have fought this guy, I would have done that. When I'm on the phone saying, here we go, we got 4 days and we're changing opponents, the story's changed, believe me, behind the scenes. Conor McGregor, I was there every single time, never flinched, never hesitated to take any fight. Believed in himself and fought these fights when people thought he wasn't ready, and the kid made a ton of money. And, when you say Conor hasn't had a good run later, well, that's what happens when you're his age and you make over $100 million. It just, money changes everything.
I've been fascinated with the story that came about this year with you, where a biologist told you had 10.4 years to live. And, people are going to look at you right now and they notice that I'm sure you've lost quite a bit of weight and changed the way that you've lived your life as a result of this. If you could give people one word of advice about how to maybe turn their health situation around if they're going through a couple things, what's the number one thing you've learned from this whole endeavor that you've had in terms of turning your health situation around?
Yeah, so I was always looking at holistic medicine like it was hippie stuff and, not my thing. Plus, I like to eat food. I like to drink. I like to have fun. And this guy did my blood work and my DNA test and literally sat down and told me everything that was wrong with me, even things that I didn't tell other people. And he knew nothing about my medical history, which was the first thing that blew me away. He said, if you listen to me for the next 10 weeks and do what I tell you to do, I'll change your life. And what's 10 weeks? 10 weeks is nothing. So I said, okay, I'll give this a shot and I'll invest the 10 weeks. I don't snore anymore. I don't have sleep apnea anymore. I don't wake up choking in the middle of the night. I sleep, 7, 8, 10 hours, depending on where I am and what's going on. My legs were really messed up. My legs are 100% again. I mean, the best way that I can explain it is as I feel 35 years old again. This guy, Gary, his name's Gary Brecka. 10X Health Systems is his company. And the guy, and I'm not the only one. All these other people that I've talked to who have used him, have had the same results.
So what's like the one biggest thing? What's your one biggest takeaway from it? Like if you could just give advice, one word of advice to people that maybe can't afford to use 10x, what would you tell them?
They can afford to use 10x. You can go online and you can do the same DNA test and blood work that I did, and they hit you back and tell you what you need to do. You know, you don't see the guy every day or every week like I do, but you can get the same thing done that I got done. All you got to do is do it online. What I would say to everybody is do it. Do the blood work. This guy is legit. He's for real. I have no interest in this. Why? What do I care? You know. And if you don't believe me and you don't whatever, just stick with your traditional doctor. Then do whatever makes you comfortable. But my experience with doctors is they don't fix anything unless you get a broken arm. Like you go in and they fix your arm or something. But all this other like high blood pressure, cholesterol, sleep apnea. Go in and tell your doctor you can't sleep at night and you got sleep apnea and you're waking up choking in the middle of the night. I'll tell you what they'll do. They'll do a sleep study and then they'll give you a CPAP machine that doesn't work. That's what they'll do. You know what this guy did? This guy stopped me from snoring. I don't snore anymore and I don't have sleep apnea anymore. Fact.
Well, I might have to jump on the economy package then. One other thing that I've seen lately is a lot of different innovations in MMA, and UFC Fight Pass announced that they are doing some cards. In fact, there was one this past weekend using virtual reality technology on the Meta Oculus Quest 2. Now, I'm sure you see a lot of stuff behind the scenes in terms of the innovations in technology that we're going to see in the coming years. What do you think is going to be the biggest change in the viewer experience in, say, like 3 years from now? People who watch combat sports, what do you think is going to be something that we see in the future that isn't really on our radar right now?
Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff that we're working on. You know, one of the mottos here at UFC has always been be first. Be first. We're you know, the buck stops here. I make all the decisions. If I want to do it, then we do it. You know, and we're obviously looking at, you know, when 3D came out, we started doing 3D. Then you know, HD and all these other things that came out in the past. We jumped all over in different camera angles and all this stuff. Now with virtual reality and you know, the metaverse, we've been talking about, you know, doing a fight in the metaverse as soon as we found out about it and learned about the metaverse. I think the next big thing is going to be there's a company out of Utah. I'm trying to remember the name of it right now off the top of my head. You remember it that I went and looked at when we were just in Salt Lake City?
The screen.
Ask Craig, yeah. Ask Craig.
Yes.
And basically, let's say I'm having this fight in Abu Dhabi. These guys are building I don't know if you call it a theater or a stadium or an arena, whatever you want to call it, where you would go in and watch the fight. And it's almost like the old IMAX, but a million times better. You actually feel like you're at the fight, and you can look around the room, and I did it in Utah, and it's amazing. And that's what's next. So you can actually go watch this. They'll have luxurious seats. You can order food. You can have dinner there. You can do drinks, bottle service, all that type of stuff.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. I mean,
It's called Cosm.
Cosm, okay.
Cosm. It's a company out of Utah, and that's definitely what's next.
I watched one event in VR. I think it was like Holloway versus Aldo in Rio many years ago. They did like a test pilot. I think you guys did one with like a Samsung headgear, and even that was cool. You could look around, you could see what Bruce Buffer was doing cage side during the fight. It was a pretty cool experience.
Cosm just came and filmed one of our fights. When they get it together, I'll do a media day for you guys, and I'll let you know some of you guys from the media come and watch this thing. It will blow you away.
I always love these new innovations in terms of how it's going to grow the sport and grow sports as a whole, so I'm looking forward to that. A couple quick updates I need from you. UFC is coming to Australia in February. I'm sure you know what my next question is. Any update on Canada? All of the restrictions have been lifted, and we're hungry here for the UFC to return.
Yeah, so as I look at the schedule coming up, we got Abu Dhabi this weekend. Then we're Madison Square Garden, Vegas. We're going to Rio de Janeiro. We're going to South Korea. We're going to Perth, Australia. And, you know, that's just by February. By February, we'll have hit all those places. So yeah, we're working on our next trip to Canada next year.
And any update on the UFC going to the UK for Usman versus Edwards, the rematch? Has the venue been secured?
Yeah, that's going to happen too.
And you're looking at the first half of the year sort of thing?
I don't know the date yet.
And last question. Last week it was announced that Yuri Prochazka and Glover Teixeira are having their rematch in December, but it wasn't mentioned where on the card that's going to be. Is there an update on Jon Jones potentially headlining that event? Is that in the works right now, or is that likely going to end up being the main event of Yuri and Glover too?
Yeah, no, we haven't said anything about Jon Jones and Stipe.
Yeah, but like I said, there was no card placement for Yuri versus Glover, so it piqued the curiosity as to maybe there's a main event that's being worked on.
Yeah, you guys think you know, huh? Yeah.
Got my detective hat on as always.
I love it.
All right, Dana, always appreciate your time, and looking forward to UFC 280. If you're not familiar with this card, you should get familiar. It's the biggest card of the year, talent-wise, in my opinion, and I always appreciate your time.
Thanks. I agree. I'm very excited for this fight.